Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be jumping into another article, and this is a continuation of our video yesterday. This is going to include the weapon changes as like damage. We've got cone of fire, we've got fall off, various different things have been changed. I have made a spreadsheet to try and make this quicker and easier to look at, and I will post everything we look at down in the description below. So if you want to check that out for yourself, definitely go check that out. Either way, let's crack on with it. So here is the main article, and this is Inside the Vault's main article. There is two. We did check out that second one yesterday, so this is the first one. And it says here, in the Gone Fishing patch notes earlier this month, we've provided an update on how we felt the combat rebalancing project we started last year has gone so far. We also mentioned in that article that we had a few more substantial updates to solidify the new foundation of combat for the future content we have planned. So let's crack into those changes. So the first bit we have here is manual aim improvements. We've made changes to all ranged weapons to improve players' ability to hit targets outside of VATS. These changes vary per weapon and include small cone of fire, reduced recoil, additional shots can be fired before reaching peak recoil, cone of fire now increases less as a result of moving, reduced cone of fire while crouching and sneaking, reduced cone of fire while aiming down sights, spin up weapons such as the minigun and Gatling laser now have reduced recoil after firing for a short period of time, reduced camera movement for many weapons actions in first person view. This includes firing, reloading, and post-fire actions such as bolt action animations. Medium and long scopes have additional zoom levels. Press the VATS button to toggle between 2 or 3 zoom levels depending on the scope. This is a really cool one actually. Note, when first aiming down a scope, you'll begin at the lowest zoom level. We've listed some general expectations for how weapons will behave below. Please note that mods can have significant impact on weapons behavior, so these descriptions refer to the unmodded version of each weapon. So take it with a grain of salt, the numbers that we're reading here. So the pistol, reasonable accuracy in all situations, retains accuracy pretty well while moving, and minimal recoil. This is really good. I love my pistols. Revolver, somewhat of a bridge between regular pistols and single shot rifles. Accurate at long ranges, but need to remain still and aim down sights for the best accuracy. Recoil is higher than many other weapons. Shotguns, spread improves while crouching or aiming down sights. Not especially accurate and has higher recoil than most other weapons. Submachine guns doesn't have the same peak accuracy in various situations as pistols or rifles, but easier to use while moving. Semi-automatic rifles, solid accuracy at long range, strong benefits from crouching and aiming down sights, not especially accurate relative to some other weapons while moving. And then we've got single shot rifles, highest overall accuracy at longest ranges, fair best while crouching and aiming down sights, not very accurate while moving, and cone of fire takes longer to recover than other weapons. Ballistic heavy weapons, reasonable overall accuracy and controllable recoil during sustained fire, but not as precise as other weapons. Spin up weapons fare better here. Good recoil and cone of fire benefits from crouching and aiming down sights. The 50 caliber machine gun maintains more accuracy while moving than other heavy autos. The light machine gun can act somewhat as a bridge between a heavy weapon and an automatic rifle. It can be more precise at longer ranges than the heavy weapons, but isn't as accurate while moving. Next we have the laser and plasma weapons. Weapons with laser projectiles typically are more accurate and have less recoil than ballistic weapons. Plasma projectiles are usually somewhere in between. Same for the alien blaster and the disintegrator. We have explosive launchers. Higher recoil but doesn't have a strong impact on accuracy due to the low rate of fire. Not very accurate relative to other weapons, low accuracy while moving. I'm sure the accuracy doesn't matter considering they go boom. VATS. The formula for calculating hit chances in VATS has been rewritten to be more consistent and intuitive. Overall, hit chances with most weapons will be higher. Distant, smaller, and more difficult enemies will sometimes be harder to hit. Here's a basic overview of how it works. The formula begins with an assumption of max hit chance of 95%. Various factors reduce your hit chance, such as distance to the target, visibility of the target, difficulty of hitting each of the target's body parts, your weapon's range, cone of fire, recoil, fire rate, etc. Perks, weapon mods, etc. can improve each of these factors or directly increase your hit chance. Perception reduces some of the penalties of large cone of fire and long distance to the target relative to your weapon's maximum range. Beyond about half of a weapon's range, hit chance steadily decreases to 0%. Below about half of your weapon's range, penalties to hit chance are reduced. As you close in on point blank range, hit chance will increase until you have a very high chance of hitting the target. Additional VATS changes. Players can no longer target body parts on the opposite side of enemies, such as the Ultra Genetic Shield Generator through front of the EN06 Guardian. The distance to target calculates for large enemies now begins on the outer bounds of the creature rather than the center of the creature. This improves hit chance for many large creatures such as the Scorchbeast Queen, which is going to be quite nice if you ask me. Explosion changes. Adjusted many players' weapon explosion so they lose less damage towards the outer edge of the explosion. Made adjustments to the Fat Man experimental MIRV and frag grenade MIRV explosions to have a wider spread for the MIRV projectiles. Fire arrows no longer have an explosion that causes nearby targets to catch fire. Increase the damage dealt by explosive arrows. Explosion force reductions. We've reduced the impact force of many explosions so they no longer push corpses and objects as far. We've also made adjustments so that the impact force of certain explosions was more appropriate to the size and scale of each explosion. Note, this change does not affect the damage dealt by these explosions. The alien detonator drone, the auto grenade, and so on and so forth. There's various weapons here in this list, pretty much all of the explosive weapon types. Then we've got the explosion size adjustments, and there's various bits and pieces here that we can read too. We'll check on that here in a moment. Additional explosion adjustments. Explosion effects from the explosive legendary mod Ultrasight laser weapons and the V63 laser carbine now match the weapon's projectile color. Reduce the frequency of grenades, mines, and explosive weapons ammo in containers and enemy loot. Increase the crafting cost of Nuka and Nuka quantum grenades. So we're gonna have less of those for our harder materials that we got. Interesting. So what I've done is I've compiled the weapons that are, and I've split them up between melee, heavy, pistols, shotguns, rifles, bow and throwing stuff, and then grenades and stuff like that, even though I could have mushed those together, just so it's easier for us to see the differences. Because if we look at the list, you will have a melee weapon, then a pistol, then maybe a sniper, and so on and so forth. I get it, they're trying to be alphabetical, but at least here we can see all of melee weapons, all of heavies, all and the changes. I've also color coded them. When you see green, that means they're getting a buff or their base damage is being increased, and if you see red, that means it's being decreased. And we've got AP, cost, stats, and the names on the left side here. So this is just a compilation of various different things that I've done here. The first tab I have here is obviously weapons, and you can see for the vast majority of weapons, at least their damage type, which is this middle column, they're all getting their base damage increased pretty dramatically. I believe, and I could be wrong, that the Super Sledge is going to be the hardest hitting weapon. Is it going to be the best? I don't know if it's going to be the best weapon, but it is going to be the hardest hitting weapon of them all. I could be wrong here. There might be something else, but at least at a quick glance, that was what I noticed. I have spent a long time actually compiling all this information. The Mr. Hand Buzzblade is red all across because I just thought it was kind of amusing that not only are they nerfing the damage of this poor weapon, but they're also increasing its AP cost by double, which is pretty interesting. Let me know if you know why. Was this weapon broken? I never heard of this weapon being broken. I always scrapped it. I never thought it was that good, and I'm wondering what possessed them to nerf it across the board. Maybe someone knows. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, or they're making a mistake. So that is happening. But pretty much everything is getting a buff across the board pretty massively. Like the tire iron, for example, is going from 37 damage to 130. One of my all-time favorites, which is the Warglaive, is going from 104 to 231 physical damage, but it's also going to gain a 20 bleed per second. So some of these, like the swords, any sort of sharp-edged blade will have a bleed effect to it. As well. I made a mistake here on the ski sword. I see that. I will change that. And then some of them, like the shish kebab, has here both physical and fire damage. That's also getting increased. So you can see here the shish kebab has 34 physical and 25 currently, but then it's going to go with a 50-50 even split of 64 fizz, 60 fire, which will make calculating damage and sort of stuff like that, if you want to do that, a little easier. So there's some huge buffs across the board for melee. And then if we look at AP though, you can see that across the board, I would say for the most part, they're being nerfed. Some pretty dramatically. Not like 9 AP is quite a lot of an increase. I think it's warranted considering the damage that they're doing is also being increased, but it is a nerf inherently if you're looking at that in that sort of way. Some of them, like the Assaultron Blade, is getting a buff in terms of its AP cost. Now, this yellow column here, I've got a few that did not get any damage buff, that being the Bone Tambo, the Drill, the Electric Enforcer, Grognak's Axe, Gulper Smacker, and Whacker Smacker. All of these weapons are not getting a inherent base damage increase in this rebalancing, but all of their AP costs are going up. Like the Drill is getting a double AP cost from 4 to 8, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. The Gulper Smacker is going from 35 to 45. Grognak's Axe is going from 20 to 46. So pretty interesting stuff here. And then I do have some notes on melee, which is a pretty big nerf if you ask me, which is the auto axe and chainsaw attack speed have been reduced from about 27 hits per second to 14 hits per second. So you're going to be doing, in my opinion, quite a bit less damage. And if we go and have a look at the auto axe, you can see its damage is being increased. So you are going to get a little bit more damage per hit, but you're going to be doing less hits per second, if that makes sense. So that's definitely something to take note of. And these weapons should no longer differ in attack speed between first and third person views as well. Next, we have heavy weapons. And some will say that these are some pretty big buffs, and there are for certain weapon types. And I want to go through this today and clarify some stuff, because I did have a comment on my previous video where I said that in the thumbnail that there was some big nerfs, and someone said this is just clickbait. Everything is getting a huge buff. That is very wrong. And if you do the math and actually look at the cards that are being changed here, it's actually some pretty big nerfs for certain weapons. And I can give you some examples here, but let's just look through the sheet here that I have. So the 50 cal machine gun is actually getting a slight nerf on its overall damage, but you got to remember that all these weapon systems would benefit currently from a 60% damage bonus, flat damage bonus, I believe it is, from the cards, right? You're not going to get that anymore. That is being thrown out the window. And so to compensate, what Bethesda are doing here is they're increasing damage. Now, you're not going to get that 60% damage back. For example, the Cryolator is going from 41 to 47. Now, I believe it's like 66 or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Currently, if you add those 60% damage cards in, right? A total of 60%. You're not going to get that back, which is definitely something to take note of, and in my opinion, a little bit of a nerf to certain weapon systems. So the 50 cal machine gun is getting a nerf, but it is going to be a little bit better in terms of its recoil management and controlling the weapon, hitting your targets, just due to its inherent changes that it's getting with recoil and cone of fire. So that's definitely something to take note of there. The Gatling Plasma is getting a bit of a nerf as well on both physical and energy. And the light machine gun, for whatever reason, is getting nerfed, and I didn't put this in the notes, but the ammo type is getting switched from 308, which I have a lot of, to, I believe, 45, which makes no sense, in my opinion. I don't agree with this at all. I understand what they're trying to do. They're going to make it sort of similar and in between for heavy users to have an assault rifle type weapon system in the heavy category, but then they're also putting a pistol ammunition in it. Makes no sense. Plus, historically, I don't think that this is based on the MG42, I think it's called. I don't think it ever used 45. I might be wrong. Someone might be in the comments like, no, you're wrong. But if I remember correct, it didn't use 45. I think it used 7.62, which is not in the game, I do believe. It used 5.56, I think, 308. I don't know about 45. So that's some useless information, to be honest, but something to take note of. So I don't agree with the ammunition change. This is really big. For people who actually enjoyed the LMG, I was one of them. I thoroughly enjoy this weapon currently. I think it's a great weapon system, and it's not getting any increased damage, even though it's losing 60% of its damage, right? And then on top of that, the magazine size is so small, right now, with the current changes, you're supposed to get 1% per 50 ammo spent, right? Up to 10%, and with cards you can go up to 20%. So this has like a 75 round mag. How do you you're like stuck at 1-2 stacks, depending. It could be stuck at 1 stack or 1 and 2 stacks, depending on how it calculates those stacks. So this is losing out massively on damage, and in my opinion, this is a nerf. This is just inherently a big nerf. Some of the other things here on the positive side, the Gauss minigun is actually getting a new effect that is gain damage. The more you fire your Gauss minigun, it's going to get increased damage up to 60%. Now, obviously, the Gauss minigun has a huge magazine size, so you can increase that through cards, put bloodied on it or whatever, and get even more damage. I think the Gauss minigun is going to be used significantly more, in my opinion, if these changes go through. And I do love the Gauss minigun. I think it's a great weapon system, and it is really interesting to see how they're sort of doing this for it. And I'm excited to try this out. We're definitely going to be trying that out for sure. But back down to the nerf side of things, if we look at, for example, the Plasma Caster, the Plasma Caster is getting a small buff. That's going from 76 to 87 physical energy damage, which is great, but it can't really take use of the new heavy cards because of the way the weapon system is. So you're kind of losing out on quite a bit of damage if you think about it because of that. And there are a few weapon systems in this list similar to that. The harpoon gun is going to do some pretty big damage, but also another weapon system that won't fully be able to benefit from the new card system for heavy weapons. And is there another one that I can throw out? The Fat Man is getting huge damage, but also another one. But I mean, it's going from 455 to 1,386. I mean, it's pretty massive if you ask me. I can't really talk about that, but the Cryolator is another one. I love the Cryolator. It is so fun to shoot snowballs and freeze things up, and it has a 25 round mag, unless you have like quad on there or something. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? The auto grenade launcher is going from 117 damage to 244. This is still not going to really be able to benefit from it. The Broadsider is another one. The Cremator is another one, and this is a fan favorite. You see them everywhere. So there's quite a few guns in this list that are just not fully going to be able to benefit from the new heavy card system. And that's why I said in my previous videos, there are some big nerfs. I think that these are some pretty big nerfs, not really thought out, and pretty one-sided for big mag daga heavy guns, and completely threw out the window any other kind of heavy gun. If they're going to go through this, they either need to make it percent based or split the heavy guns into two categories, where the Cremator, the Broadside, or the Plasma Caster, all that get their own new cards that will benefit them, and the big dagger guns will be in their own pile with the current changes. That's my 2 cents on that. Let's move on. Now we move on to the pistols, and there are some pretty big changes to some of these pistols, and one of them being the black powdered pistol, going from 347 to 751 damage. I might actually have to pocket one of these. I do believe I've got a pretty good rolled one stashed somewhere, so I might have to pull that out and give that a go. That sounds like a lot of fun. We're going to be one-shotting stuff with that stuff. It's going to be a good time. Across the board, pretty much everything is being buffed in terms of their base damage, including the Thirst Zapper, which is across the board also being buffed in its damage types. The Gauss pistol is being nerfed pretty minutely in my opinion, but it's still a nerf. And the laser pistol is being nerfed. I don't know why the laser pistol is being nerfed. If somebody knows why, is it OP? Is it broken? Is it absolutely disgusting? I don't know, but it's being nerfed. I don't use that weapon, so I wouldn't fully know. But another big change is to the Gauss pistol, and you're going to see this with a couple of the other Gauss weapon systems too. The Gauss pistol will now use 2 ammo per shot and has an 18 round clip. Yeah, so that actually means you're going to have what, like 9 shots on your Gauss pistol. I mean, it's still a decent amount. Considering it's a big damage sort of weapon system, but that's still a pretty interesting change. But in saying that, there is a note that I could put here. They are increasing the amount of ammo you use with the 2mm, but 2mm will drop more frequently now due to some of these changes to how ammo is consumed on certain Gauss weapon systems. Now we're going to be moving over to the shotguns, and we've got 3 here: the combat shotgun, the Gauss shotgun, and the pump action shotgun. The only one really I hear, but as you can see, their base damage is being increased, is the Gauss shotgun. That one excites me so much, and it is getting a pretty substantial increase in damage from 285 to 390 damage. That is pretty big if you ask me. But on top of that, there is a note that we're going to have to put in there. That is, Gauss shotguns now use 5 ammo per shot and has a 5 round clip. That is pretty substantial. I believe it's like 5 or 6 shots. I can't really math that at the top of my head, but yeah, pretty interesting to see. But like I said, 2mm should be dropping more, hopefully. It did put that in the notes for us to gather. Next here is the rifles, and there are a couple of nerfs to maximum damage, but or base damage I should say. But here you can see pretty much most of them are getting a huge increase in damage. The big boy here is the Dragon, going from 541 damage to 1,145 damage. That is a huge increase. that is absolutely flipping insane. If you ask me, I'm gonna have to try out some of these black powdered weapons because this sounds fun. The Gauss rifle, fully charged, does 315 currently to 47. That is actually going to be nerfed a little bit down to 309 and 46. I'm guessing it was overperforming. I never actually got around to trying it in the current state. I do have one, and I was meaning to, I just never got the time to. And another thing here to take note of is the Gauss rifle is now going to use 3 ammo per shot, and you're going to have 15 rounds in the magazine. Another thing to take note here is the V63 laser carbine is being nerfed from 59 damage down to 47. Next here we have the bow and throwing weapons, you could say. So we've got across the board, we've got damage increase, which is a much needed thing, to be honest, on these weapon systems. I think I'm going to be setting up a compound bow. I'll try them all out, but I'm really excited to try out this compound bow. Going from 112 damage to 244 damage should be fun. Plus, the benefits to bows is that now through cards, going to be getting a bounce effect. So bow type weapons are going to get a bounce effect on arrows, losing 80% damage per bounce, as well as the bow type weapons will get a piercing effect on arrows. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, I might have read wrong, throwing weapons and bow weapons are considered sort of in the same field vicinity, so they might be benefiting from the same cards. We will see. But I am super excited to try out the compound bow. But one thing to take note here is the tomahawk is going from 100 damage to 506 damage, which is quite a bit. Now, another thing here, and this is the final one of these lists. Now, if I might have missed a couple of weapons here and there from the actual page, I hope not, but I did try to compile it all. I have spent a couple of hours actually doing this. But here we've got nades and mines. I put these in their own little category, and across the board, unit grenade is getting a buff as well. So across the board, all of them are getting a pretty significant buff. For example, the baseball grenade that not many people use. Some people might, but I think most people, the majority of people, sell these or throw them away. Going from 175 damage to 346. That's pretty big, if you ask me. The cryo grenade, it does currently 50 cryo damage, is now going to do 396 cryo damage. So some pretty big stuff here. There are some other things to take note with the grenades, and that is throwing weapons such as throwing knives, fragmentation grenades, sheep squatch quills, and mines now scale with player levels up to level 50. So you're going to get some benefits for being level 50. They're going to just do that bit more damage. And then on top of that, we've got some explosion size adjustments. So the bug grenade, 30%, cryo grenade, 20%, cryo mine, plus 20%. These are all pluses. There is one minus here though. The frag grenade, 40%, frag grenade, MRV resulting projectiles is 50%. The thirst zapper, nuka cherry, nuka cola, and nuka quantum is going to go respectively 92%, 220%, and then minus 43% on the quantum, which is pretty interesting. The Fatman experimental MIRV initial explosion is going to be a plus 150% explosive size, which is pretty big if you ask me. The floating flame grenade, will be 150%. The floating freezing grenade, 120%, as well as the Nasher grenade, which I believe is the poison one, that does 120%. And then the frag mine is going to do 20%. So I'm wondering, I might actually start stacking some of these and trying out a poison build, because they really are, not poison, but a dot build, because I think they're trying to bring in dot builds, because it would be kind of an interesting thing, right? So definitely something I'm personally going to try out just for the fun, just for the memes, just for something new. Who knows, it might be good. But yeah, that's the grenades across the board. Big changes coming to those as well. Weapon bash damage has also been changed across the board pretty much. A lot of weapons bash damage is being increased, like the fixer going from 15 to 61, combat rifle 15 to 71, just to make it, like if you're getting dogpiled, to give you an option, I suppose, to bash, as most people don't really do that. I mean, the Gatling plasma and the Gauss minigun are going to pack a wallop at 121, I suppose, in terms of bashing damage. And you can actually further increase this with cards as well if you really want to. Next, we have the weapon ranges. We've adjusted the range for most players' weapons to shore up some of the shortest range weapon types, such as shotguns, and to help differentiate many weapon classes that previously congregated, I'm going to say, into about 204 and 288 feet of range when modded. I am dyslexic, so reading can be difficult sometimes. Note, explosive launchers range is primarily derived from their projectile, so these numbers serve as a rough guide for their effective range. Note, mods can have a strong impact on weapon ranges, so the numbers listed here are for the base weapon with a short barrel. So considering that this is like short barrel stuff, and I know for I want to say for most people we like to use longer barrel things to get some benefits. We can skim through this briefly. What a grenade launch going at 182, my gosh. But I don't see like what to what, you know what I mean? So we're just going to briefly skim through these because I don't remember these off the top of my bloody head, if you know what I mean. But yeah, so you can obviously adjust some of these with modifications. And let's get on to the next bit here. Additional range changes. Weapons now have reduced damage when exceeding their maximum range, down to 10% at double their maximum range. Previously, we had modified most weapons to scale to 50% damage at their maximum range. This is unchanged. The change mentioned above only applies as weapons exceed their maximum range. So what they're saying here now is that you're going to be losing 10% of your damage that you're currently doing, which you're still losing damage the further out you go, if you're exceeding your maximum range. So maybe trying to max that out for some weapon types is a must to retain that big damage. Next here we have is the miscellaneous mod changes. Okay, so there was 2 of these for the pipe gun, and now it's being transferred to a 45. Okay, cool. Fixed an issue where laser and plasma weapon mods, which added fire damage, only had fire damage over time instead of also having fire damage on hit. So I guess some of the laser and plasma weapons are going to be doing even more damage because it was missing. Damage from sniper charging modes on laser weapons has been greatly increased. So that being the Gauss sniper, and I think there's a couple more too, but I'm guessing primarily the Gauss rifle, which is going to be hitting harder fully charged. And the damage of the Gauss rifle is actually, the overall damage, like the base damage, is actually being lowered, which I think is trying to push people with this change to actually use that charged up hit, which, to be honest, makes sense, right? Bonus damage, armor penetration, increased limb damage, bleed damage, etc. from heavy barbed, bladed, spiked, puncturing, and other mods on melee weapons is now applied much more consistently relative to the mod's name and appearance. Ultrasight ammo. As mentioned above, prime receivers are now much more powerful. Ultrasight ammo is now geared towards being specialized ammo that players use when they need a large boost in firepower over regular ammo. Ultrasight ammo is no longer included in contextual ammo drops. Instead, you'll receive randomized ammo. Okay, interesting. Radstorm and glowing creature changes. In order to increase the availability of materials used for crafting ultrasight ammo, we've made the following changes. Radstorms are slightly more common across Appalachia. Nuke flora such as bombberries and flash ferns now have a chance to appear in radstorms. This is really cool to see. Glowing creatures now have a chance to appear in radstorms. This is also really nice to see. Glowing creatures will often scale slightly above players' levels upon up to level 100. Glowing creatures now scale more appropriately for lower level players. Okay, so they're not just going to absolutely obliterate new players, which is great. Glowing creatures can drop hardened mass and similar nuke-only materials during radstorms, including glowing creatures that would have spawned regardless of radstorms. This is really, really, really nice change. Hardened mass is really annoying to get, and dealing and launching nukes to then just go get some. This is overall, I would say, a pretty good change. Improved loot from petrified corpses, common on Morgantown Airport and other locations. Reduce the impact of luck on the rate at which the VATS critical attack meter fills. Situations where the player would fill the meter in 2 hits will now be closer to 3 and 4 shots. So I am a player that gets this. I can fill up my meter in 2 hits, just boom, boom, done, and then critical hit. So this is kind of a nerf to VATS. Explosions from nuke grenades no longer ignore line of sight. Interesting, this is a nuke grenade nerf. Sneak damage is now multiplicative instead of additive, meaning sneak attacks can hit much harder than before. Increase the speed of the baseball grenade projectiles. Ghoul feral accuracy reduction now reduces VATS hit chance to 30%, in addition to the unchanged 300% cone of fire increase. Bonus slim damage from twisted muscles no longer works with ranged weapons. Enemy adjustments. Since many lower performing weapons have received significant damage increases, median player's damage is now much higher. To account for this, we've adjusted the health and resistances of the following creatures. These creatures also have additional contrast in their resistances to better highlight their strengths and weaknesses versus each damage type. Turrets. Hostile turrets not in player camps and workshops. Super mutants. So there's a bunch of changes. I'm guessing they're making them harder to kill. Super mutants, mole miners, enemies in power armor, protectrons, rad scorpions, robo brains, assaultrons, firecrawler, pretty much across the board. Even super mutant behemoths, grafton monsters, scorch beasts, mylar queen. Across the board, there are some, they say changes, or I'm guessing they're going to be harder to kill and have definitive weaknesses to them. Miscellaneous enemy changes. Liberator lasers now deal energy damage instead of physical damage. A few Deathclaw attacks which dealt 200% damage now deal 150% damage. This is great. Deathclaw attacks were, yeah, they one-shot me a lot. They're probably still going to one-shot me, but yeah. Deathclaw move speed increased by 10%. That's kind of scary. Deathclaw combat behavior modified to be slightly more aggressive and more melee focused. Yeah, that's quite scary. Most robots are now immune to bleed damage over time effects. Robots with an organic component, such as the robo brains, have been excluded from this. Good to know. Adjusted the damage of the volatile mutation seen in Daily Ops. This effect no longer ignores armor, now deals damage similar to other explosions rather than percentage of players' maximum health. Yeah, this used to absolutely obliterate me, but yeah. So my conclusion of all of these changes is it's a mixed bag. There are some phenomenal changes that I can't wait for. For example, seeing damage numbers for dots, which is phenomenal. Dots being buffed, snipers being buffed, shotgun, the Gauss shotgun is being buffed, and various different things across the board like that. But then there's just some really, really off changes, like to the 50 cal, which is getting its range reduced dramatically. The LMG, which is just makes no sense going to a 45. Like, I can understand 5.56, but 45 makes no sense whatsoever. And so it's a mixed bag, and there's some things that should happen and there's some things that don't happen or shouldn't happen, but we're going to check out a lot of these on the PTS, so stay tuned for that. Either way, cheers all for joining me, thanks all for watching, and I'm going to catch you all on the next one.